distinguished guests. My name is Aisha Khan and I will be moderating this session titled Climate Justice, New Narrative of Hope, Resilience and Security. We have a very high-level panel with us today with 3 stellar speakers. I would like to welcome the Honorable Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, serving as Judge of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, the Honorable Justice Jawad Hassan, serving as Judge in the Lahore High Court, and Senator Sherry Rahman, former Minister for Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Welcome to the Pakistan Pavilion and honoring us with your presence and participation in addressing one of the most important aspects of the climate agenda. To start this discussion, I would like to request Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change. Okay, I would also like to welcome Ms. Inger Anderson, Executive Director, United Nations Environmental Program. Honored to have you with us, ma'am. I'd like to now welcome Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination, Syed Asif El Shah, to please deliver the welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. On behalf of the Government of Pakistan and the Ministry of Climate Change, I am privileged to welcome our esteemed guests here, their lordships, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, Justice Jawad Hassan, Justice of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, Shah Sahab, and Justice Jawad Hassan, Justice of the Lahore High Court, and Excellency Senator Sherry Rahman, a known figure, a former minister, Excellency Inger Anderson, and all the participants here. So this is in fact one of the series of segments of panel discussions that we held in the Pakistan Pavilion, and no issue can be more critical than climate justice. So I welcome you all, and I wish we all go back educated after this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for setting the stage. The planet is burning and we are running out of time. Without climate justice, millions are likely to face a future that will deprive them of the opportunity to live life with dignity and respect. To comment on this and much more, I would like to request Ms. Inger Anderson to please come and share her thoughts with us.
Thank you very, very much. It is a great honor for me to be here. Certainly, I should not have been the one speaking first, because I'm speaking in front of the Supreme Court Justice, Syed Mansoor Ali Shah. I'm speaking in front of the Honorable Justice Jawad Hassan, and of course my dear sister and fellow warrior Senator Sherry Rahman. I do beg your forgiveness for stepping out in 10 minutes time where I'm due to speak somewhere else. But I have to say just this. Bravo to Pakistan for leaning in on green courts. Bravo to Pakistan for raising this issue. Bravo to Pakistan for also engaging internationally in the issue of climate justice. Pakistan suffered a great injustice with a massive flood that your beautiful country endured. A flood that you will be living with the consequences of which for many, many years to come. And Pakistan has been and continues to be a shining light on many issues pertaining to environmental management, conservation, and the climate issue. Because we understand that climate justice and climate change go hand in hand. And when we ensure that the laws are upheld, that the laws will hold clear those polluters responsible, it is a step forward. Climate justice matters on the global scale, but climate justice also matters on the national scale. And this is where the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court Justice, is of course setting a standard. In the context of the international work, Pakistan is well known for what it has done pertaining to green courts, pertaining to having judges that understand environmental matters and therefore can educate the law. This is not what we see across the world. This is something that a few countries are stepping into, and we do salute Pakistan for this work. At the same time, we have to be very realistic. We are not where we are supposed to be with respect to climate change. And it is the countries that have contributed the very least that suffer the very most, as exhibited by your own dear country. I was privileged to visit, was it in August of last year? And I saw for myself the inundation and the way in which people who had already been struggling were now completely of the floods. And so what we are going to be seeing is more floods, are more heat waves, are more droughts, are more wildfires. And so the injustice of that is something very real. This is why you are all here. This is why you are all pushing for 1.5. We need to understand that the largest G20 economies are responsible for 75% of all emissions, and therefore they need to lean in while everybody needs to decarbonize as fast as they can, making sure, of course, that there is fair and just financing available for those who need it. Judiciaries play an enormous role and a critical role in advancing climate justice through the implementation of the environmental rule of law. And I will leave one of my colleagues behind so they can tell me all the good things that this eminent panel will be talking about. And I do beg your forgiveness, but there was a press conference that got moved. Nothing to do with us, but it happened. And so I have to beg your forgiveness, but I do thank you very much for this brilliant leadership. Thank you so very much.
Ms. Anderson. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Before you leave, let me just acknowledge and appreciate your comments on the challenges that Pakistan faces, and also appreciate the efforts that you've recognized on the way forward in the need to develop social, ecological and democratic equity in a just future. Thank you so much for your remarks. We have His Excellency Majid Al-Swaidi, Director General and Special Representatives COP28 Presidency with us. And I would like to request you to please come on stage to set the stage for the discussion that is going to follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good evening, or good afternoon, I should say, sorry, to everybody. Distinguished guests, of course, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a privilege to be here with you today. I'd like to express my thanks to the government of Pakistan for hosting us at this event to discuss what is really a crucial topic of climate justice. Pakistan is one of the countries most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It is among those who have contributed the least that challenge. Recurring climate events have inflicted a massive toll on Pakistan, destroying not only infrastructure, but also lives and livelihoods. Last year's flood alone ravaged the southern half of the country, led to losses of over $30 billion. If you also calculate supply chain disruption that led to spiraling inflation and economic losses, that number will be much higher. Responding to the consequences of these increasingly frequent climate events is urgently needed. This is why we are pleased to see the operationalization and capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund on the first day of COP28, with $726 million pledged by several countries, including the UAE. For many years and over many COPs, the Pakistani government has used its influence and voice to advocate for greater mitigation and adaptation action to unlock climate finance and deliver climate justice. And Pakistan has highlighted time and time again why people must be at the heart of climate action. The unfortunate reality is that even if we meet our ambitious goals from Paris and keeping 1.5C within reach, climate change will still impact us. Adaptation is what enables us to respond to these impacts and put lives and livelihoods at the forefront. And adaptation must be prioritized alongside mitigation. The modeled costs of adaptation in developing countries are estimated at $215 billion per year this decade. The adaptation finance needed to implement domestic adaptation priorities is estimated at $387 billion per year. That's why the COP28 presidency is committed to ambitious adaptation action to ensure no one is left behind. We must do more to ensure we have the enabling mechanisms in place for adaptation. Equity and justice must be at the core of our approach. Developing countries, small island developing states, least developed countries, women, youth, and lower income groups often face the most severe climate impacts and yet have the least access to resources to cope with those impacts. Communities affected by conflict, security, and fragility are also receiving the least climate finance per capita in the world. Science has made it clear what's at stake. While the reality is grim and in many ways there is good news. We've seen early victories and historic progress made in the past week at COP28, and this momentum is only strengthening. The world is coming together to keep 1.5 within reach and driving progress across all pillars of the Paris Agreement. I mentioned earlier the operationalization and capitalization of the loss and damage fund. With early action, we are delivering for the vulnerable, rebuilding trust, and are now turning our focus to agreeing on the most ambitious global stocktake decision possible. We also launched Altera, the world's largest private market climate vehicle with $30 billion. Along with contributions from the private sector, Altera will catalyze up to $250 billion by 2030. And we secured the largest ever replenishment of the Green Climate Fund with $12.8 billion. These are unprecedented paradigm shifts in climate action, but they are also just the beginning. First, finance is one of those critical enablers that cuts across all sectors. We're making progress in our goal to double adaptation finance, but this is the bare minimum. And even once we reach that goal, we must go further beyond to match the scale of the challenge. And second, we need an all-of-the-above approach. We need to adopt a comprehensive, robust framework for the global goal on adaptation with clear targets. We must then break down silos, develop integrated and holistic responses, and ensure that previously overlooked topics are given the attention they deserve. These topics range from protecting and restoring ecosystems, food systems, and water, to building resilient societies with a focus on health, humanitarian relief, recovery, and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, let us continue to reignite hope through tangible progress and meaningful action. We have one more week to go. We ask for your continued support and partnership as we work towards climate justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for setting the stage for the high-level segment of this discussion today. This is a COP where parties are taking stock of commitments made in Paris and setting a course with ambitious targets to plot future trajectories. While conversations in the negotiating rooms are focusing on finance, mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, it is important to remember that without an agenda of solutions that is perceived as fair for all, no substantial progress can be expected on any front. Honorable Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, you have the reputation of a judge who takes a rights-based approach to climate change and is sensitive to its impact on actors across sectors. You already have made many landmark decisions to your credit that highlight the nexus between human security and climate justice. Your stance is best captured in your own words, and I quote you, "While mitigation can be addressed with environmental justice, adaptation can only be addressed through climate justice." I invite you to please come to the podium to share your thoughts on the role that the judiciary can play in advancing climate justice and ensuring that it is effective and provides timely relief.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. That's a very generous introduction. My co-panelists and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. The idea today is to tell you about how a judge or how Supreme Court or how High Court perceives climate justice and how are we approaching this issue. But what's very important at the very outset that I want to say is that Pakistan is the first country that has invited its Constitutional Court judges to COP28 to highlight its robust environmental and climate justice. This is the first. I don't know of any country. I think that's very forward-looking that Pakistan has done that, because judges around the globe are playing a very effective role as far as climate justice is concerned. But Pakistan is the only country that has brought its own judges and having a session for that. Pakistan is the first country that has weaved international environmental principles like sustainable development, precautionary principles, public trust, etc. to its constitutional values and fundamental rights, and called it environmental justice. So the term environmental justice has also been coined as an amalgam of fundamental rights and international principles. Pakistan is also the first country to have the first judgment on adaptation in the world of climate change, which has come to be known as climate adaptive jurisprudence, and will go a long way in developing climate constitutionalism. I think that deserves a clap. Pakistan is also the first country that has recognized the concept of water justice in dubio pro natura and climate democracy in its judgments. Pakistan is also the first country to recognize the importance of climate finance in the context of the recent devastating floods, and has proposed ways to ensure transparency in its allocation. Perhaps the first one talking about climate finance. Pakistan is also the first country where its judiciary has taken to climate resilient approach towards adjudication and interpretation of taxing statutes and policies. That again deserves a clap. I don't know, why do I have to say it? No, just on a lighter note. So the fact sheet, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I sit in a court, the highest court in my land, and I need to tell you about my country, because that's how the framework of the judge is. You see how the judges are adjudicating the matters. So I sit as a judge in the highest court of a country that is home to more than 5,000 years old Indus civilization, a country with a blend of landscapes varying from plains to deserts, forests, hills, plateaus, ranging from coastal areas of the Arabian Sea in the south to the mountains of the Karakoram range in the north, with a population of 240 million, and is the 5th most populous country in the world. Pakistan has negligible contribution towards greenhouse gases, yet it is the 8th most affected country due to climate change. That's what brings in the jurisprudence that we're going to talk about. Climate change or emergency, or climate emergency as the Secretary General of the UN now calls it, and rightly so, has led to considerable increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events in Pakistan, coupled with erratic monsoon rains causing frequent and intense floods and droughts. Recession of the Hindu Kush, Karakoram Himalayan glaciers threatening water inflows into the Indus rivers, being a water-stressed country, raising temperatures, resulting in reduced agricultural productivity, threat to coastal areas due to projected sea level rise and increased cyclonic activity to higher sea surface. Now this is the animal, this is the problem we sit as judges looking at, and that's how we're going to go about adjudicating. These are the facts and the background. The above threats lead to major survival concerns for Pakistan, particularly in relation to the country's water security, food security, and energy security. Let me at this stage also highlight that environment or care for environment hasn't come to us through the West. Somehow we feel that the entire concept of environmentalism has just dawned upon us or landed in our countries from somewhere. And I want to stress this, that this has been there forever with us. And I refer to Islamic environmentalism here, because we are judges coming from an Islamic state of Pakistan who have rich values in religion and in Islam. So caring for earth is not only a scientific and economic necessity, but also a spiritual and a moral imperative in Islam. Islam teaches the humans that they are the stewards, khalifas of the earth, entrusted by God to care for it. The Holy Quran emphasizes the importance of maintaining mizan, balance, in all aspects of life. Environmental degradation and climate change are seen as manifestations of the imbalance caused by human actions. We are guided by sustainable development, but also by the principle of Islamic sustainability, which links sustainability principles with Islamic spirituality and ethics. So there's a lot more to it as when we approach climate justice. So coming of age of the environmental justice as far as we are concerned in Pakistan. So first 40 years of our period that starts from 1980s all the way up to 2018, the constitutional courts proactively protected the environment, equated the right to clean environment as right to life and human dignity guaranteed under the constitution, and we were looking at our environmental issues which were arising within the country. So two famous cases that come out at that time were Shaila Zia and Imrana Tivana case. Shaila Zia was about this grid station being set up in Islamabad, and Imrana Tivana was about this signal-free corridor being set up in Lahore. So the courts read in these, what the courts did in these two cases was that they read fundamental rights to life, Article 9, and right to human dignity, Article 14, and the constitutional principles of democracy, equality, social and economic political justice into the international environmental principles of sustainable development, precautionary principle, environmental impact assessment, inter-generational equity, and public trust doctrine, and evolved the brand of environmental justice. So for the first 40 years, we were local environmental issues, creating what has then later on been branded as the environmental justice. And our environmental justice is an amalgam of fundamental constitutional rights and international environmental principles put together through judicial engineering, if we were to say that. Then comes, and I must acknowledge our environmental champions at the time were Justice Salim Akhtar of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, who authored Shaila Zia, and Dr. Parvez Hassan deserves appreciation and acknowledgement. They were the drivers at that time. Then we come to 2018, and climate change enters the equation. Judiciary soon realized that climate change for developing countries like us was a whole new problem. It had nothing to do with our environmental issues, but related to malfunction of what we call the Earth climate system. And the main culprit wasn't, in our jurisdiction, and the courts could not do anything about it. The polluter wasn't in Pakistan; it was just happening outside. That's the change, the major paradigm shift, because normally the courts would go and shut down an industry, go after a polluter, but you can't do that. There is no polluter. It's all happening outside your jurisdiction. All you need to do is adapt to the changing environment. And how does a judge then come up with jurisprudence to adapt to the new situation? So unlike the Western courts that were dealing with mitigation and producing emission-related jurisprudence, our main concern was adaptation. And I want to underline this, that the adaptation is no ordinary business. It's a serious business. Dealing with mitigation is not that difficult. Dealing with adaptation, as I'll explain, is far bigger canvas and a broader area to cover. We set up to produce climate adaptive jurisprudence. Adaptation as a strategy engages many stakeholders, which earlier were not part of the environmental dialogue. Climate justice therefore moves beyond the construct of environmental justice. It has to embrace multiple new dimensions like health, food, energy, water, human security, displacement, human trafficking, and disaster management within its fold, which is not the case for mitigation planning. Climate justice covers agriculture, health, food, building approvals, industrial licenses, technology, infrastructural work, human resource, human climate trafficking, disaster preparedness, while mitigation can still be addressed with environmental justice, as quoted by Aisha Khan earlier. While mitigation can still be addressed with environmental justice, adaptation can only be addressed through climate justice, where the courts help build adaptive capacity and climate resilience by engaging with multiple stakeholders. So what are some key types of adaptive policies that we look at? We look at, as a court, we might have a case that might not even mention this in in the case itself. The judges need to decipher that from the case itself. So a case that is relating to infrastructure resilience is actually a climate resilience matter. So if there is a case regarding sustainable agricultural practices, it's actually an adaptive jurisprudence matter. So water resource management, coastal zone management, disaster risk management, and management of urban planning and design, health sector, community engagement, capacity building, diversifying crop varieties, water management, enhanced forecasting, early warning systems, technology and innovation is all a climate change issue for countries like Pakistan, the developing countries. So please understand the width and the size of the problem for judges to look at. And I must say that, we went ahead and developed what we call climate constitutionalism, because to us, Pakistan needs to have climate constitutionalism. It is to be as important as the constitution itself. Climate needs to be read into the constitution. It's those serious existential threats Pakistan faces. And we could not look at the constitution or any other policy or any other law without recognizing that there has to be climate resilience read through everything, every statute, every law, every provision of the constitution. We must read into it climate resilience for us to survive. So courts evolved climate constitutionalism, trying to make every sector climate resilient. So we come up with a case called Asghar Laghari, which you might have heard of. Asghar Laghari is a case where we said, okay, there is a climate change policy. Okay, let's work on it. That's an adaptation policy. Let's go about it, because the government wasn't doing anything about it. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody even knew what global warming was at that time. So when we called, the judges called these the government and the relevant officers at that time, we could tell that they were not aware of what to do. So a very innovative way was, a pathway was carved out, and that was to come up with a judicial commission. And the judicial commission was called the Climate Change Commission, which was headed by Dr. Parvez Hassan, but it also had international NGOs like ICN, WWF and others. At the same time, it had the government, it had the civil society, because the courts didn't have an answer to agriculture in that area. So that's one. And then we also came up with a CDA case where we said that CDA is a Capital Development Authority which looks after urban planning, and we said every urban planning that you do in the capital city has to have a climate resilient approach towards all the building policies that you come up with. So this is the climate resilient approach which we call adaptive jurisprudence that has come out of Pakistan. And then come the floods of 2018, another watershed. I'm just taking you through how things are changing, you see, as far as the judicial approach is concerned. 2018, there was most devastating floods in Pakistan. And now comes the question that adaptive jurisprudence without money is nothing. You can't do anything. You can't adapt, you can't change unless you get money. Money is climate finance. And that's for the first time that climate finance gets nuanced at that time in 2018. So COP27 and the wonderful stewardship of Ms. Sherry Rahman here from Pakistan pushed the global agenda towards the agreement on loss and damage. And thank you for that. The importance of climate finance and the rights of the vulnerable countries to global finance cannot be underplayed. The goal is to enable a transition towards low carbon climate resilient development. This involves investments in clean energy, sustainable infrastructure, and other projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and enhance adaptation to climate change impacts. Developed countries have historically contributed more to greenhouse gas emissions, so there is an ethical argument, and I want to underline that. It's an ethical argument that they should bear a greater share of the cost for addressing the effects. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities recognized in Paris Agreement acknowledges that while all countries should address climate change, they have different capacities and levels of responsibility. Without climate finance, there is a risk that the gap between wealthy and the poorer nations will widen as the latter struggle more with the impacts of climate change and have fewer resources to adapt. There is no way that we could meet the gap unless this finance goes through. So it has to be pushed. Climate finance is essential and critical for survival. That's how important it is. And I want to underline that as a judge, that it is important. The Supreme Court of Pakistan in Sartaj Haider case, which was post-2018 floods that came out, that a climate resilient adaptation plan, including a detailed mechanism for utilization on climate finance coming to Pakistan from the loss and damage fund is the need of the hour. For the first time before anything, Supreme Court has recognized that climate fund is important and climate fund has to be monitored so that it gets to the right people once the money comes in. Supreme Court is watching you. So make sure whenever the money comes in, Supreme Court is going to be watching. So the money gets to the right people. Setting up a global adjudication forum, global court is a suggestion that ICJ must also look at that. We must think of a climate court that is, I think, it can't work without it. So either ICJ does it or we think of developing a world court on that. Domestically, climate finance could also come domestically. So domestically, the Supreme Court has evolved a climate resilient approach towards adjudication and interpretation of laws and policies encouraging facilitating climate finance, supporting green taxation. Recently, we just decided a matter where we looked at the taxation provision and we said this exemption must go because it is climate resilient. So that was a factor in interpreting a law which was never ever done before. I don't know of any jurisdiction that is using interpretation of the rule of interpretation of statutes and using climate resilience as a factor. So supporting green taxation, climate resilient budgeting is very important. Integrating climate resilience considerations into national and local government budgeting, allocating funds specifically for adaptation measures such as infrastructure improvement, agricultural resilience, and ecosystems conservation. So if the government were to bring any plans or any funds before us, we'll make sure that that money actually goes for climate resilient work first and takes priority. So I'll move on. I think I might be running out of my time, so I'm just in the end, I'd like to say that climate science is also very important for us, but in the end, all I want to say is that the courts of the world have jumped into the debate now, and the courts are watching you. So we want the climate finance coming through, and that will go through because now the courts of the world are watching you. Thank you.
For highlighting the need for constitutional support and adaptive jurisprudence for strengthening resilience. We look forward to more climate democracy globally and to green judges like you to pave the way for a fair future. Senator Rahman, you served as the climate minister at a time when Pakistan was leading the G77 plus China last year at COP27. Your role as a champion of climate justice and efforts resulted in the landmark agreement on loss and damage, which you called a down payment on investment in our future and in climate justice. L&D is now recognized as a separate entity and financial pledges are being announced here at COP28 to make it operational. But as you have repeatedly highlighted, there is still a long way to go. I invite you to come to the podium to share your thoughts on the next steps needed for mainstreaming equity and justice in climate change law and policy in ways that ensures that development leaves no one behind.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, and honorable justices, Mansoor Ali Shah and Tamzini Khan, and others present here, senators, friends from the media, and my colleagues from the Ministry of Climate Change for an excellent job you've done here. I think itna to banta hai, Shah sir. And very quickly, I'm going to not speak from the thoughts already shared. I don't want to repeat what's been said in very cogent and clear terms. And obviously, we all are collaborating towards a greener future. And courts are critical in Pakistan, certainly, and internationally, in redefining how we think about adjudicating not just disputes, but climate action itself. So before I address some of the things I really want to talk about in terms of climate justice, I just want to say that adjudicating climate justice has become very much an international new normal, and a new normal. And while we appreciate the term fit for purpose, which is important for climate adaptation, it's crucial for climate adaptation. There is no one size fits all in any race to resilience. But when it comes to international law and covenants, let me tell you that universalism has protected countries like Pakistan, where judges are not fungible, neither are many of the laws that we come about. Many people are not replaceable, right, or interchangeable. It's a question of how a particular judge, like the Honorable Judge here, interprets and regards the environment as critical or pivotal to his judgment, whom he deems as important, and which petitioner he thinks has the moral purpose driving their case. So I think that is critical. But the rest, for countries like Pakistan, and I must look at it globally as well, whenever we have walked away from international covenants, most of the time, the laws, and I'm sure our judges will appreciate that many of the laws or covenants that we sign up to, treaties that we sign up to, have actually protected us, and they have been challenged locally in the name of vulnerable people being attacked, especially for women, for religious minorities, for transgenders. Oh, those are universal laws. Let's leave them alone. No, we have signed the UN charters that bind us, and those laws apply to everyone in the world. So there is no fit for purpose human rights laws, especially those that apply to climate. Yes, adaptation is entirely fit for purpose and local. But do not tell me that we must create our own frameworks. That sometimes culture is quoted, Judge Saab, sometimes culture is quoted as a reason to keep people behind. I was with Benazir Bhutto Shaheed many years ago at a huge international conference at the United Nations. It was Beijing, and then one was Cairo, when a great deal of pressure was put on the Prime Minister of the country to not go, to not sign CEDAW and other international commitments. The same applies to environmental laws that generally are signed on by us. We are signatory to over 20 treaties and covenants in climate change and environmental protection. And I'm very proud that we make a great deal of effort to abide by them. But let me just also say at the outset that, there was talk about climate justice, which lies at the heart, in my view, of the bargain between the global north and the south that was struck at Paris. That was the spirit of the Paris Agreement, Where are we today? At COP number 28. I'm sorry, Majid, my friend was not here to listen, but I really feel strongly that there are two toxins at the heart of the climate crisis. Two. One is inaction, and the other is injustice. Those were addressed by Paris. What do I mean by that? Inaction has a great bearing on injustice, because the inaction of a big polluter has a clear impact on your life, on my life, on the woman who's carrying water from a field to the home for miles. That has a direct impact. Inaction today at COP28, which is a historic opportunity. Well, every COP is a historic opportunity, because if you don't make good, then you've missed a landmark date for saving not just the planet, not just the future, but half the world right now. Why do I say half the world? Because half the world is what is actually being left behind as we speak. The bumper sticker is leave no one behind. Is that not? Is that not? May I have your attention at the back? The bumper sticker is leave no one behind. Well, right now, according to the synthesis report of the IPCC, we are leaving half the world behind already. The vulnerability index is only going up. The emissions gap is not particularly down either. In fact, quite the contrary. I remember at the last COP saying 1.5 has not been kept alive. We are going straight to 2.8, and people thought that was, well, a little bit of a doom and gloom Cassandra conversation. Well, here we are at 3 degrees centigrade, as the UNEP report tells us. Onwards towards 2.8 to 3. What will that do to the vulnerable? You will not feel it in the cooler climates or the richer climates. Why? Because the richer are better prepared. They understand the governance of resilience, because their governments run differently. They run on oiled wheels and inclusion mostly, not thoroughly. And ours, the post-colonial states, are busy still picking up the pieces from the last disaster, which no one actually hears about. Now, Pakistan is not about the Great Flood of 2022. It is not. But it has been marked, scarred, and defined by it. So why will we not let the rest of the world be marked and also defined by it, not scarred? There's no shame in Freud here. We don't want to enjoy other people suffering. But 33 million people were devastated and impacted last year by a completely unpredictable flood, where the management of risk and vulnerability became a new frontline nightmare for a country that didn't even understand the impacts of global warming on its daily lives. We were 33 million, just to settle everybody's mind at a multilateral forum, is the size of 3 medium-sized European countries. That was just our impacted people, not vulnerable. So what I'm trying to tell you is countries that are drowning in, say, a flood or excessive global warming, not triggered by their own actions, because obviously, like Africa, we are not big emitters. Now, Africa is now on everybody's mind. I would urge this COP to remember that South Asia also needs to be on everybody's minds. Countries like Pakistan also need to be on everybody's mind. We are not big emitters. We are not the G20, which, as Inger Anderson just told you, emits 75 to 80% of global emissions and are therefore responsible. What would my bumper sticker for an ask from this COP be? Responsibility. Take responsibility, either for your emissions, lower them drastically, show us a path where we are back towards at least 1.5 or 2, because the path we are on will need 43 degrees percentage of reduction in emissions to just keep it as it is. And as you know, climate change impacts stay in the atmosphere for much longer, even if you have reduced your emissions. So the burn is not going away for a long time, and the burn is going to be felt by us on the front lines, not the colder climates. But even the colder climates need to worry there will be no arcs of privilege to leave for another planet. Not in time, because the clock is ticking. This is not happening in some foreseeable future. The clock is ticking on all of us right now, and we are going, there's a lot of money going to be poured into searching for Mars, looking for Mars, landing on Mars. Of course, man's quest to explore the unknown is what takes us to great heights, but it also leads us to over-extraction, over-consumption, and ignoring the fact that, yes, I said last year what goes on in Pakistan will not stay in Pakistan, ignoring that the climate is connected, the ecosystem is connected, everything is connected. If my ecosystem fails, make no mistake, one way or the other, your ecosystem next door or the one after, it depends on El Nino, El Nina, whatever, will also collapse. And we do not want that. What was the summer of 2023? Did it not teach any lessons to the whole world? Everywhere there was climate calamity. There may not have been catastrophe, but there was calamity. And that is just a postcard from the future to all of us who are not thinking hard enough about applying this to our lives, to our policymakers, holding governments and global governments, which is this. This is the heart of global governance. This is how multilateralism works or doesn't work. One day it works, the other it doesn't. 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward. I don't know if this will be 3 steps forward, but that is the opportunity in front of us today. There is an opportunity to peak in a few years, to peak emissions, but it's not close enough for those of us on the front line. We who live in that red arc of vulnerability are already burning up, and we didn't know why. Now we know why, and we are going to hold you to account. That to me is the heart of climate justice. There are hundreds of now, there are at least 67 countries that are adjudicating, including ours, on environmental courts. Those are national and local contests, because climate aggravations, environmental degradations bring conflict and contest to the front line. They don't allow for peace, they don't allow for stability, they don't allow countries to recover from debt or tax whom they need to. So when the MDBs tell us that structural reform means withdrawing, say, agri-subsidies, we're like, okay, but what about the $7.2 trillion, which I haven't heard about much this week. $7.2 trillion of subsidies are going to the oil and gas sector. Won't that just wipe out everybody's debt and help flood recoveries and various other recoveries? So look, we have the money in the system. Let's not beat about the bush. Let's not be siphoned into sideway conversations, which is what's happening all over the world. The side conversations that keep you busy seeking blended finance, private finance. Sure, we'll have that in the next session. I'll suggest cogent ways for my countries to access it. But really, should you be asked to make bankable projects when one-third of your country is drowning? Should you really? Should you be asked to make bankable projects and then compete internationally for financing, green financing? I just heard someone say that's how countries unlock financing. Why is it locked? Why is it locked in the first place? Why should we have to unlock it? No, it should be in the principle of equity, open and accessible with agility, ease and flexibility in the time that is needed, with the speed it is needed, to where people are drowning. I don't want to repeat the statistics the WHO has repeated this week. You've all seen the health statistics. So we've all seen the disaster statistics. Just remember one thing, that we keep saying let's not leave anyone behind. Well, right now, as we speak, we're leaving many countries behind, and that is half the world. Let's not be meeting here again to say that number went up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator, for raising the level of engagement on climate justice to a higher equilibrium at the national and international level. We look forward to continued role from you in climate advocacy. Honorable Justice Jawad Hassan, you have said that the Constitution categorically states that every citizen shall have the fundamental right to life subject to law, and the Supreme Court has expanded the term life by including the right to a healthy, clean and pollution-free environment. In addressing this crisis, private finance plays a vital role. Yet, attracting private investments toward climate actions remain a challenge. To unpack the complexities about fairness, justice and equity, I invite you to the podium to share your thoughts on how to overcome barriers of finance and business that promise a fair future and shared prosperity for all. Thank you.
First, I must welcome Dr. Christina Boyd, the chair of the IUCN, and also Professor Catherine to Professor at Cambridge University. And I gave a seat like a gentleman. That's it's a great pleasure to address you all, but I must first congratulate Pakistan for this extraordinary initiative they've taken to invite the judiciary of Pakistan to share with you what first they have done in the world. Why the anthology of our jurisprudence has been well accepted, recognized, relied, followed and admired by the other courts, as Mr. Shah mentioned, by the law journals, by the professors in the universities, and the books in the world. My task in a few minutes is to put into this wider international context and look at in the development worldwide. One cannot underestimate the critical importance of one having an effective, speedy, powerful, independent judiciary like Pakistan for protecting first the environmental justice, then climate justice, now climate finance. But not for Pakistan, for the whole world. That's not the judgment when you are writing. When Shah was writing judgments, and I was writing mostly the judgment of all of us, we do not think about as a Pakistani judges. We think as a global judge. The theology behind the constitutional powers of Article 199 and Article 184 clearly demonstrate the whole world today in Dubai corporate here that Pakistan, being a party to all the international covenants, Pakistan being the signatory to all the agreements like Paris Agreement as Senator Shahid Rahman mentioned, 2015, Pakistan did and has done, implemented Article 5 of Paris Agreement by vindication through a judgment and a law, Article 7, carbon sink, Article 4 of the Paris Agreement. How will explain when I am mentioning 12 first points for Pakistan on every division. Well, first has the International Covenant on the Law of Treaties 1961 mentioned about Article 26 that every treaty in force is binding on the parties and must be implemented, but it should be a court, through by Parliament. And Parliament has passed laws. Parliament has amended the climate policy at the time of Senator Shahid Rahman. They have implemented all the international mandatory requirements of the international law into a domestic law, being the transformation and the delegated country like Pakistan, not Germany, not France, which are the monopolistic countries under international law. Second point, before I've not started my speech yet. I'm just building my point to say how good we are. Then, everyone was looking at Pakistan and Pakistani judiciary, looking again at Pakistan and Pakistani innovations. But one drills down and see why judiciary led the way internationally, where the divide between the North and South became prominent after Stockholm 72, then became more prominent in the Rio 92, and then in Johannesburg when they included the judiciary of the world that they should be involved now. Then the prominence was showing, which I was mentioning with Professor very clear at the conferences recently, it became that now North is following South's judgment. The trigger of the judgments came from Mr. Mansuri Shah, the climate justice judgments. The divide is no more a divide. Now South is making the entire world as now claiming out the judgment. UK, climate justice, Germany, Netherlands, the issue relating to the issue in the US, all the countries are coming out, and even Ecuador. But what are the four factors behind our great issue? Number one, the constitutional powers, or to protect the fundamental rights. Second, and the most important is the new concept Pakistani judiciary started with the commissions and the committees, technical, Mr. Shah just mentioned. Third, and the most important is the supervisory role we have to the tribunals and to all the regulators like the Green Financing to the State Bank, CGS to the Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. But people have faith in the judiciary of Pakistan. It has been shown worldwide that with that efforts of Pakistan judiciary, we had the Bourbon Declaration 2012, where 11 judges of SAARC countries, and they came and declared to form the environmental judges and to form the environmental tribunals, which did perform in 2013, and everything was concluded. The judiciary became active. It's all because of the efforts of the SAARC countries having judges coming to Pakistan in the very area of Bourbon. But this has a side effect. What are the side effects of Pakistan? Very important. First side effect, it has increased the prestige of countries internationally. I've been here for the last 4 days. Professor Mary knows we've been attending some functions. Wherever you go, oh, you're from Pakistan. You're from Pakistan, what remains in Pakistan, has in Pakistan, remains in Pakistan. The quotation of Pakistan call. Pakistan is seen internationally now. Judiciary too, it's a government. Two, that has an impact on foreign relations and internationally, and the position of Pakistan internationally at the diplomatic level. Invisible earning and the confidence of sponsors will then strengthen on climate finance. But if somebody now looking at the climate finance, whether it's a grant or a loan, it's a loan by the MDBs or a loan by the private companies or how they will examine, judiciary will look into it. The first thing a donor or a developing country will touch upon is the lawyer in Pakistan. Is the climate of investment good in Pakistan? Yes. What? We establish commercial. Speedy, effective, trusted court system like the London Commission. We established the concept of arbitration. And what led us look good at the end? I will say, Shah Sahab just mentioned 5. First, I will say we have been 12 times first. In 3 minutes I'll finish. First was Pakistan, first country in the world giving a judgment when unfortunately out of 192 countries in the world, Pakistan constitution does not have rights to environment like other countries in the world. Supreme Court of Pakistan, Shalabjad, held the right to life means right to a healthy environment free for pollution and equality. Second first by Pakistan is first country bringing the soft international law, the principles of Rio Declaration, the principle of Stockholm Declaration, the principle of precautionary principle IUCN covenants into the system unto Pakistani legal system by the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court decides and develops a principle, it becomes a binding judgment under Article 189 of the Constitution. Article 189 says the judgment of the Supreme Court enunciates the principle of law, but decides the question of law, shall be binding on all the courts. And the doctrine of precedence. Third first is first country in 2018 giving right to climate justice by the solution. We talked about it. First country developing a concept, Mr. Shah mentioned, of in a technical matter, appoint a commission, appoint a committee, resolve an issue through a constitutional provision by involving rights to fundamental rights to dignity, rights to property, rights to privacy of home. What will happen to people who have lost their property? What will happen to their people? Can they come on the street and beg the West world for money? They have dignity. And dignity as under Islam and the last khutbah of Huzur Prophet 632 AD. Constitution itself says you have all the fundamental rights of people law, but dignity is not submitted. Supreme Court again held that. Sixth, first, adaptation of the adaptation measures under Article 5(7), that was judgment by me on tree plantation. I want the government said, I don't want forest in a forest. Peri-urban policy, forest trees in the urban cities for carbon sinks. And the efforts of Senator Sharif Rahman, 1 billion trees were planted as tsunami relief. All the efforts of everyone. Everybody. Ministry. Then, 7th first, or whatever, 7th first, but government is the government, no party. 7th first country to have rights to food from Article 9. In Aman Sota judgment, and I mentioned the right to life means right to a food security. That is a new concept we developed. Right to life means right to a food security as per the concept of our Paris Agreement. Then, 7th, first country to recognize the protection of foreign investment through a commercial court under a Pizza Hut judgment. Then, 8th, first to say the concept of if a donor comes into Pakistan, invests in Pakistan, and there is a foreign arbitration clause in that. If the award is taken against a party in Pakistan, what is the view of a Pakistani court? That judgment recently I held, federal judgment, Shah is also dealing in judgment that shows a doctrine of pro-enforcement bias. We have to be pro-enforcement to award should be made a rule of court without any objection to be raised under the New York Convention 1958. That's a very important point for Pakistan to look good internationally. First country that recently, 2 weeks ago, given a judgment on to avoid dispute between a green project in energy and a green project of investment between two partners, foreign partner, local partner. Can we go to arbitration? Long time, lot of money involved. If we go to any other litigation, long time, lot of money involved. London is very expensive for Pakistan now with the exchange rate. So I came out with a concept called regulatory mediation to the Security Exchange Commission of Pakistan. Mediation could be a facilitative mediation, it could be a evaluative mediation, and that mediation worked out. They didn't go to idea, they didn't go to arbitration, they came out, settled the issue, and the project in sin is happening. That is a new invention we did. And last, Pakistan is also the first country who first time discussed in detail the principles of Islamic principles into a judgment, which Shasha mentioned. And the message is, man is a trustee of God in this universe. And you are just a trustee by linking with the public trust doctrine of common law. That concept, which is well recognized now, will be taken into the constitution, and people have developed that concept and how Pakistani courts are developing this jurisprudence. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Jawad Hassan, for highlighting the link between justice and finance and the need to bring down barriers to access, scale, and affordability on climate finance. Justice Jawad Hassan has already welcomed Professor Dr. Christina Voigt and Professor Marie-Claire Seger. Let me also extend that welcome to you on behalf of the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Affairs. I would now like to invite Dr. Christina Voigt, Chair of IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law and Professor of Law at the University of Oslo, to please come and share some brief comments with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And on behalf of the IUCN World Commission, I would like to bring very nice greetings to this room, because the Commission has had a very long-standing, warm relationship with the judiciary in Pakistan, with many environmental lawyers. We are looking at decades of collaboration, and it's very proud for me to be here and to mention it, and thank you for that. We're talking about climate justice, and we heard from Senator Rehman that it means taking responsibility for leaving no one behind in creating a future that is protective of also the most vulnerable and exposed to climate change. And here we're looking at many different levels for climate justice. We're looking at an international level where we need to take into account the differences, the vast differences between countries in creating an equitable and just international system to address climate change. And the differences lie in the contributions to the problem, be they historic or contemporary. The differences lie also in the vulnerabilities and exposures to the impacts of climate change. And the differences lie, as we just heard from Justice Jawad, they lie in the capabilities and financial possibilities to address climate change, to mitigate, to adapt, and to address losses and damages. But climate justice is also an issue of domestic law, of domestic legal systems in the context of legislative approaches, for example, planning and zoning laws, human rights laws, disaster preparedness, energy security, security for water and food. And here, when we talk about the national legal context, of course, also the national judiciary plays an indispensable role to protect the rights of the voiceless and the vulnerable and the marginalized, a role to ensure the implementation and compliance of the laws that exist, and a role to hold to account those that do not act in accordance with the law. The role of the judiciary cannot be overemphasized in this fight. And as Justice Mansour mentioned, it has now reached the level of apex international courts. We have evidence that we are in good hands here, with Justices Mansour and Jawad present, and I would like to thank you for your work, and thank you to everyone for inviting the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for talking about roles and accountability and need for a proactive judiciary. I now invite Professor Marie-Claire Seger, Visiting Chair in Sustainable Development Law, University of Cambridge, to please come and share her remarks with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation, and thank you for the incredible work that you are doing in such desperate situations and circumstances. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you especially for calling upon all of us and this COP and the world to recognize climate justice and the hopeful dimensions of climate justice. It's an honor to give just 3 key closing remarks here. The first, of course, is to recognize and honor the contributions of Justice Jawad, of your judiciary, sir, Justice Mansour, and of the Senator and the entire legislative movement that she is leading, as well as our colleagues from the IUCN World Commission, in moving forward, not just the thousands of lawyers becoming involved through Climate Law and Governance Day, through the broader initiatives throughout society, through the specialist groups that IUCN is leading, and through the International Bar Association, the International Law Association, and other partners. When things get very, very bad, and they're really wrong, we call in the lawyers. There are over 110,000 people at this COP, not because we have succeeded. As someone who has been here since 1991, in the prep comms to the United Nations Convention itself, and was there with Mary Robinson in Paris, when she said, Marie-Claire, climate change is the justice challenge of our century. I can tell you that it is time to call in the lawyers. And in particular, when I look at the rivers that are drying up in Kenya, the Chief Counsel of the World Bank, Victor Mosoti, spoke about so eloquently on the closing of Climate Law and Governance Day just a few days ago. When I look at the floods you are facing in Pakistan, that Justice Jawad brought into the day with such eloquence, and that you, Judge Mansour, and you, Senator Sherry, have brought in here as well, that this entire pavilion has been courageously bringing in to this COP. When I look at the forests in Canada, for which we went on hunger strikes when I was 17, for which we blocked the roads to save when I was 14, which because of climate change are now burning around us. I think it is more than time to call in the lawyers. And when we call in the lawyers, we need to look carefully not just at the international law to which you referred so eloquently, and not just at the national regulations to which many of you also highlighted, and not just, as we discussed in Climate Law and Governance Day, the net zero legal frameworks to enable climate neutral investment and finance. But we need in the end to be looking at climate justice and resilience. We need to be looking at liability, at compensation, and at restitution. And that is why we need you, our judiciaries. You are the ones we need when the lawyers fail. We call our judges, and we expect them to bring forward integrity, to bring forward that justice that is needed. We need the International Court of Justice, and I thank and recognize my colleagues, especially from the South Pacific, with their students that are fighting there today. We need also to recognize the other international tribunals, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, the regional human rights courts, and we need especially to recognize our national judiciaries, upon whom, into whose courtrooms these problems are arriving now. It is a little difficult to say this, but it is something that I think everyone here from Pakistan understands. Unfortunately, restitution cannot help us when what we have lost is priceless. We stand now at maybe the final chance to turn this in the right direction. Everyone here has, to a certain extent, voted with their feet. Every judge here has already made their view clear with the gavel and every professor here with our pens, that tiny little tool that sometimes is mightier than the sword. So we're at your service, and we hope desperately with the courage, the creativity, and the commitment we need here.
Thank you, Professor, for the shout out on integrity and justice. With that, we come to the end of this high-level segment of our discussion. I would like to thank our honorable speakers for your very valuable and perceptive insights that have definitely helped us deepen our understanding of justice and how intricately it is linked to a safe and fair future. I thank you once again for your time, contribution, and powerful perspective. Thank you very much.